Okay, hi guys, welcome back. Now, moving on to the next class, we're going to talk about the camera shake. Now, we'll add a camera shake to our first person just to mimic the natural movement of the person. Again, as we said, we want to be making this as realistic as we possibly can, especially for ArcViz experiences. So this will give us the ability for the camera to just sway slightly, ever so slightly, to make our scene look more believable, more realistic. Okay, as you saw in the DViz photorealism course, we're going to use something very similar with regard to how we put this together, because I believe in that course there's a section on sequence and animation. So it's something similar that we'll be using here. So when you start playing, you can see here the camera is just static. Okay, so to make it a little bit more realistic, we're going to add a slight sway, a natural swaying of the camera, almost like the person's breathing. Okay, so there's a very subtle movement. I'll show you how it's done, and it's really simple, but let's see it put together step by step. Okay, so the first thing we have to do is to create a camera shake. So we can set it up and then add it to our first person. So first thing to do is come here and create a blueprint class. And down here, there's some other types of classes for blueprints. These are the most common ones at the top. Some of them we've already used, such as character, player controller, game mode base, etc. But there are thousands of other types down below. Okay, now we can type in shake, and we need to just find the camera shake blueprint. We're looking for camera shake base. So this is the one, camera shake base. If you're using Unreal Engine version 4, it might have had a slightly different name. I think it was camera shake. So they've now just added differentiation between the two. And the one I'm going to be using is this one here, matinee camera shake. Okay. So it's the one that I like to use the most. So I'll start with this. Select here, then create it, and I'm going to name it BP underscore my camera shake. Okay, nice, done. So I can double click on it and it opens as if it were just a normal blueprint, even though it doesn't have a components window here, but there is an event graph for us to create routines and functions. Okay. What really matters to us though are the settings here. Basically, we have some subcategories that are really helpful in understanding the movement of things. And in the matinee camera shake, just under this section here, so under this camera shake section, we used to select it at the end. I believe it's the same thing in version 5. But now the pattern, the type of oscillation is already set up for us. Okay, so here there's no need to do anything. So we don't really have to change much here, even in terms of the oscillation or the camera swaying. So we can change the oscillation at the top, the speed. What's important here though is we have the rotation oscillation. You can see the full name when you hover your mouse over it as well, which is helpful. And there are 3 axes for pitch, yaw, and roll. We saw this previously, didn't we, when we were building our character, that if you put the mouse on here with the camera and just move its direction, it will move on axes called roll, yaw, or pitch. Okay, so that's the way in which it oscillates, because the name indicates its direction. The camera shake will then move depending on the different axes. Okay, so we can also do like move up and down with the pitch. And this is the yaw movement. Okay, so what are we going to be doing? Well, we're basically going to be creating an oscillation or a movement in these 3 different axes. The amplitude is how much it's going to spin. So the bigger the amplitude for roll, for example, then the further it will incline the camera on both sides. Okay. So the amplitude is the degree of oscillation. Then you have the frequency. Since we're talking about oscillation, in theory, this is almost like a wave. Okay, so the frequency of that movement. Every wave has an amplitude, the height of this curve, and the frequency of how fast it's going to do that. Okay, so it's going to move from, perhaps for example, from 0 to another number, and we can adjust the speed in which it does that, in which it moves on that angle. So let me just show you here. If I use a timeline, I'll do it on the timeline here just to represent it so we can get an understanding of what it's doing. Just put in a keyframe here and just quickly draw out the wave in which it's going to move. And then another node here. Okay, so we just make that curve. It's a little crooked, but it's okay. So this is how the movement will happen. This is represented in a wave. Okay, so it leaves from 0, it goes up, then down, and then up again. And this is an example of a wave, or how the amplitude works. The amplitude is this measurement, the height of the wave, and the higher the number, the more the amplitude, or the more amplitude it has, and the frequency is also how close each wave is to each other. If we stretch this over here, the frequency will be smaller, okay, or be less often because the gaps are wider. So this is basically what we have here when we're talking about the amplitude, how much it's going to oscillate, and the frequency, its speed. In initial offset, it's set to random, and there are, if you select 0, actually it's going to start from an initial position, but it might look too mechanical. So if you choose random, it changes. It's like, suppose we're looking up or down, then it will begin at 0 and then goes up and down on the next move. So instead of beginning at 0 every time, it's going to begin on 2 instead of 0, for example. Well, it will start moving from where we actually are rather than going back to a 0 point. And we also have the this sin wave here as well. So these are the kinds of waves that you can look at on the documentation of Unreal to find out more about them. Now we have the camera rotation on the 3 axes, all listed here. And we have the position as well. And we can drop that down. So we can oscillate on the X, Y, and the Z axes as if it were in our camera. And doing this, the Y axis or the Z axis, moving it just like that, it's the same principle, okay? But it's going to be all applied to the location. So LOC or lock is short for location, and ROT for rotation. Lastly, there's FOV, which is field of view, and we can also edit the field of vision here as well. And this is almost like working pretty much like a zoom, okay? Not exactly like that, but you know what I mean. It's affecting how much you can see from one position, how wide your shot is or how narrow it is. Okay, now this is a lot of theory, I understand, but we also want to be showing you some results. So let's add a value of 200 here. So we want to show you some results too, not just theory. So I've put 200 in at the top value. I can put 1 here and 1 there just to see what happens. And let's set this up. I won't change anything else. I just for us to understand the movement, I'll just leave it like this. And I'll keep this here for now. I don't even know how the results are going to come out actually. So we'll see that together later. Let's hit play. Okay, and nothing's happening because I just created a camera shake in our content, but nothing's happening to it. Okay, because we didn't really do anything with it, did we? We just created it. So what do we have to do first? Well, first we need to start adding it to something, don't we? Our character, right? So how do we do this? Well, let's think about it. Let's think about those questions that we suggested to ask: the when, the who, and the what. So when will this movement start? When I hit play on the game. Okay, it's going to start then because my character will be here on screen. And this then will begin the camera shake at the beginning of the game. So we need begin play. We need that event. So at the beginning of the game, it's going to execute this function. But before calling the function, I have to present a node, or put a node here, which is the node that controls our camera. From this node, I can get the function so that we can work on the right function and register the node. And this one is called getPlayer. So the one we're going to be using here is the camera manager one. But you can see that there are all different types of getPlayer nodes that we can use to capture the player, lots of other things, the controller, etc. So the character itself or the game controller can also be used, but on pawn as well, you can use getPlayer pawn. But for us, we'll just pick getPlayer camera manager. So let's select that. So we've got a reference to that now to indicate what it's all going to be controlling or referencing. So we pull out from here, and I'm going to look for shake. And now we need to look for the start camera shake. And in Unreal Engine 4, I think it was called play camera shake, but in 5 it's just called start camera shake. So we need that. I don't know why they changed it, but anyway, that's what it is. The principle is exactly the same. So let's put this, just put this here, and I'll connect it to event begin play. Cool. So I need to select the camera shake from the drop down list here. Okay, the one that we created. And let's compile and save, just so we saved everything. And let's press play just to see what happens. Okay, so what can we see? Well, now there's a camera movement, isn't there? A gentle sway. It's moving up and down at a particular speed, which is the speed that we set here. Okay. So I just change this value to 2. And it's only going to be moving the pitch, the up and down direction. Okay. This is the pitch here. It's only going to be doing that. That's exactly what it's doing. So let's have a look. So I changed the frequency here. Let's see what happens with the changes. Okay, so what do you notice? It's faster, isn't it? Moving much quicker at that speed. So I can change it drastically to see it even clearer. Let's go back in and play. There we go. It's moving very fast now, isn't it? It's almost like the person is nodding their head in agreement, aren't they? So this is used to simulate the character's breathing. So we don't really need it moving that frequently, because that's going to be over the top, isn't it? Almost like the person's panting or out of breath. That's too much. So we can alter that. So that's the setting where we can adjust the frequency or the speed of the pitch. So I just recommend you just play about with some of these settings here to get it just right for how you feel it needs to be. Test them, understand each one, and just give it a go. And you'll be able to see at first hand the difference that each setting creates. Now let me just stop here and type the parameters I prefer to use, the ones that I tested and I enjoy using, and I'll leave the settings with my preferred values just to make things a little bit easier for you. So I'll just enter them in now, but you can put the values that you want, of course, and these are the ones I'll recommend if you want to have the gentle experience. And I'll just increase the duration. The amplitude goes to 0.25, frequency 0.5, just make it slow. And here I'm going to use the format Perlin noise. If you see it in your test, you'll understand what that does. It's hard to explain, but it's how the sway operates, okay? and it also it's also worth altering these settings here. This one I'm going to put to 0.1 and 1, and Perlin noise 2. And here I can change the field of view just a little bit, just a bit. And also I'm going to use Perlin noise at the bottom. Okay, so basically that's what I do. Now, if you wish, you can pause the video and write down the settings that I've used here, or just copy them in your file. It's okay if you want to copy them, that's no problem. It's also important for you to run some tests though as well, so you can understand the settings in case you want to change specific parameters. Okay, so let me just save all and press play, and I'll show you what it looks like. There you go. So there we see the gentle sway, right? Even if we walk, so when we're moving, there's a gentle sway, isn't there? And then we can try the crouch feature. Let's press that. So we crouch down and come back up. So it's very slow, isn't it? And now let's try running. There we go. So that's it. In this class, I wanted to show you the camera shake resource. And as I said, it's pretty simple, isn't it? We've gone through some of the settings, the parameters. We've added it to our first person view. But now let's add a comment to it. And I'll call it play camera shake, just to keep things organized. And we've gone over what the nodes actually are as well. But one thing I didn't mention here is the scale. This is the target that we already put here. So here's the shake class for the one we're using. Now, if you have more than one, you can have one camera shake for walking, another one for running. That's an option you can have in games, and you can make we can tie them together, okay, or you can control them by certain functions when you press and when you release. I don't think it makes sense to add them to ArcViz experiences though, but I just thought I'd let you know that it is possible to do that. Now, if you want, you can give it a test in your in a bit of your downtime if you want to research how that works. So here's the location for adjusting the scale. So the scale is going to adjust all of the values that we've got here. So if I increase the scale, it's going to multiply every setting we've got. So it's a shorten, or like a shortcut to adjust everything to multiply it. Okay. Now, we don't have to worry about anything else here. So we'll leave it as it is now, and we'll go on to our next class.